think that social media, the way that it is now, is hampering a lot of the progress that we've made and taking a lot of young men and young boys into very dark places, which should concern all of us.
Prince Harry just spent an hour lecturing the world about privacy, oversharing, and keeping children off social media. He warned parents about the dangers of posting their kids online. He slammed tech companies for exploiting personal information. He positioned himself as the ultimate defender of digital privacy, and he did it all on a massively popular podcast, broadcast across every social media platform imaginable, while dropping personal details about his own 6- and 4-year-old children. You cannot make this up. What we just witnessed wasn't an interview about child safety. It was an accidental confession. A masterclass in contradiction. Harry didn't just reveal his hypocrisy. He served it up on a silver platter with a side of cringe-worthy American accent attempts. The privacy crusader who uses publicity to fight for privacy. The protective father who discusses his kids on public platforms. The man who fled the media spotlight only to chase every podcast microphone he can find. This interview exposed it all, and we're about to break down every contradictory, hypocritical, jaw-dropping moment. Because when Harry talks about privacy, what he really means is control, and the evidence is right here in his own words. Let's dive in. Here's what makes this interview particularly revealing. Harry sat down with Hassan Minhaj specifically to discuss the Parents Network, an initiative through his Archwell Foundation aimed at protecting children from social media harm. The entire premise was about keeping kids safe online, warning parents about digital dangers, and calling out tech companies for their exploitation of young minds. Noble cause, right? Absolutely. Child safety online is a critical issue that deserves attention and action. No one can argue with that premise. But here's where things get interesting. Throughout this hour-plus conversation, Harry repeatedly emphasized the need for privacy, the importance of protecting children's digital footprints, and the dangers of sharing personal information online. He spoke passionately about parents who've lost children to social media, about the need for caution, about thinking twice before posting anything about your kids. And then, in the same breath, he proceeded to share specific details about his own children. Their exact ages, their activities, their locations, their daily routines. He discussed conversations he's had with Meghan about their parenting decisions. He revealed what his daughter does with a toy wand. He talked about their schooling plans and his fears about their future relationship with technology. Every single one of these details is a piece of the privacy puzzle he claims to be protecting. Every mention is a data point that contradicts his entire message, and he did it all while sitting in front of cameras, knowing this content would be distributed across YouTube, podcast platforms, social media clips, and entertainment news outlets worldwide. But the contradictions don't stop at his children. The entire framework of this interview reveals a fundamental disconnect between Harry's stated values and his actual behavior. He's built a career post-royalty on speaking out, sharing his story, doing interviews, writing memoirs, and appearing on podcasts. His entire public presence is based on the strategic use of media platforms and careful management of his personal narrative. Yet somehow, he's positioned himself as the victim of media intrusion and the champion of privacy rights. He warns about the dangers of social media while promoting his initiatives across those very platforms. He criticizes tech companies for exploiting personal information while exploiting his own royal status and personal story for platform and profit. He fled Britain claiming he wanted privacy, then immediately embarked on a publicity tour that would make any Hollywood agent jealous. This interview crystallizes all of these contradictions in one convenient package. We're going to examine 3 major areas where Harry's words and actions collide. His approach to discussing his own children despite warning others against it, his use of the very platforms he criticizes to promote his anti-platform message, and his fundamental misunderstanding of what privacy actually means when you're voluntarily sitting for interviews. The evidence is overwhelming, the contradictions are undeniable, and Harry provided all the receipts himself. This isn't speculation or tabloid gossip. This is simply Harry's own words, examined in context, revealing a pattern of behavior that completely undermines his carefully constructed image as a privacy advocate, and it starts the moment he opens his mouth about his kids. Let's start with the most glaring contradiction in this entire interview. Harry's whole reason for being there, his entire platform, is built on protecting children from online exploitation and digital harm. He's working with parents who've lost their children to social media. He's advocating for stronger protections, more awareness, and extreme caution when it comes to kids and technology. So naturally, within the first few minutes of this interview, he tells the world exactly how old his children are. The host mentions having 2 children, 7 and 5. Harry immediately responds with precision. 2 children, 6 and 4. Not young kids or small children or even just a son and daughter. No, he provides their exact ages, creating a specific data point that anyone watching now knows. Archie is 6, Lilibet is 4. Information locked in, timestamp confirmed, ages documented for the entire internet to process and catalog. Now you might think that's innocent enough, Ages aren't that sensitive, right? Except Harry himself, later in this very same interview, is going to warn parents about exactly this kind of information sharing. He's going to talk about how every detail matters, how images and data can be manipulated, how parents need to be extremely cautious about what they put out there about their children. But before we even get to those warnings, he's already violated his own rules, and he doesn't stop there. When the conversation turns to parenting strategies and the challenge of kids asking for technology, Harry doesn't speak in hypotheticals. He doesn't use generic examples. He gets specific. He talks about conversations he's had with Meghan, not my wife in passing, but detailed discussions about their specific parenting approach, their concerns, their strategy for handling technology requests.
Talk about it a lot, and I think that, because of what we know now, we will be way more cautious and hesitant of allowing our kids to have access to social media.
There it is, a window directly into their private parenting discussions. He's just told the world that he and Meghan have ongoing conversations about this topic. He's revealed their parenting philosophy. He's confirmed they're actively strategizing about how to handle technology with their specific children. This isn't a public service announcement. This is personal family information broadcast to millions. But wait, it gets better. Or worse, depending on your perspective. Later in the interview, during a lighter moment about knighthood, Harry shares an incredibly specific detail about his daughter. He describes how she takes a fairy wand and taps him on the right shoulder and the left shoulder, mimicking a knighting ceremony. He confirms she just does it naturally, without being taught.
My daughter, she'll do this thing where she has kind of like a fairy wand, and she'll do this on the right shoulder and the left shoulder.
This is an adorable personal moment between a father and daughter. It's sweet, it's endearing. It's also exactly the kind of intimate family detail that Harry has spent years insisting should remain private. This is the man who sued multiple publications for invasion of privacy, who left an entire country claiming the media intrusion was unbearable, who has repeatedly stated that his children deserve to grow up away from public scrutiny. And here he is, voluntarily sharing a specific behavioral quirk of his 4-year-old daughter on a podcast with over 2 million subscribers. He's painting a picture of her personality, her imagination, her daily interactions with him. He's giving the public a glimpse into their private family life that no one asked for, and that completely contradicts his stated position on privacy. The justification doesn't hold up either. Some might argue he's trying to normalize conversations about parenting and technology, that sharing these details serves a greater purpose. But that argument crumbles the moment you consider what Harry himself says later in this same interview about posting children's photos and information online. When asked directly whether parents should post photos of their children online, Harry's response is clear and unequivocal. He says parents should be really worried, concerned, and cautious about putting photographs of your kids online, especially now.
You should be really worried, concerned, and cautious about putting photographs of your kids online, especially now.
Especially now, with AI, with manipulation technology, with the ability for images and information to be used in ways parents never intended. Harry understands the danger. He articulates it clearly. He knows that every piece of information about a child becomes a data point that can be exploited, manipulated, or used in harmful ways. So why is he providing those data points himself? Why is he creating content that includes specific details about his children's ages, behaviors, activities, and daily life? Why is he discussing his private parenting conversations with Meghan, giving the world insight into their family dynamics and decision-making processes? The answer isn't complicated. It's because Harry wants it both ways. He wants the privacy and protection that comes with keeping his children out of the spotlight, but he also wants the relatability and connection that comes from occasionally mentioning them when it serves his narrative. He wants to be seen as a protective father while also leveraging that father identity to build credibility for his advocacy work. This is selective privacy, strategic privacy. Privacy on his terms when it's convenient, in the doses he deems acceptable. It's not actual privacy. It's control of the narrative while maintaining public engagement. And the fact that he can't see the contradiction or chooses to ignore it reveals everything you need to know about his approach to this entire issue. Throughout the interview, Harry positions himself as someone who deeply understands the threats facing children online. He works with parents who've experienced the worst possible outcomes. He's educated himself on the dangers. He knows the statistics, the research, the horror stories. His concern appears genuine, his passion undeniable. But if the threat is real, if the danger is as serious as he claims, if parents really should be extremely cautious about what they share about their children, then why isn't he following his own advice? Why are there any details about his children in this interview at all? Why not simply say, I have 2 young children, and as a father, these issues concern me deeply, without providing ages, behaviors, or family anecdotes? The truth is that Harry needs the mentions. He needs to reference his children to establish his credibility as a concerned parent. He needs those personal touches to make his advocacy feel authentic and relatable. He needs the audience to see him as a father figure who understands their struggles, and so he shares just enough to accomplish that goal, while somehow believing he's still protecting their privacy because he's not posting photos or discussing them constantly. But privacy isn't a sliding scale where you get to decide which details are okay to share publicly and which aren't. Privacy means privacy. If you're genuinely concerned about your children's digital footprint, you minimize it completely. You don't parse out acceptable levels of personal information based on what serves your public image. Harry and Meghan have made privacy their battle cry for years. It's been their justification for leaving royal duties, their reason for legal action against publications, their explanation for choosing their lifestyle and location. The privacy of their children has been held up as sacred, non-negotiable, worth fighting for at any cost. Yet here's Harry, in his own words, on his own terms, in an interview he chose to do, sharing details about those very children he claims to be protecting. No tabloid forced this information out of him. No photographer invaded his space. No publication twisted his words. He volunteered this information freely, knowing it would be broadcast worldwide because it served his purpose in that moment. That's not privacy. That's publicity with selective boundaries. And the fact that he presents it as privacy advocacy makes the contradiction even more glaring. You can't be the champion of keeping children offline while putting your own children's information online. You can't warn parents about sharing details while sharing details yourself. You can't have it both ways. But Harry's going to try. And as we'll see in the next section, this contradiction extends far beyond just his children. It infects his entire approach to the very platforms and publicity machine he claims to be fighting against. Now let's talk about the elephant in the room. Actually, let's talk about the entire circus, because that's what this interview reveals about Harry's relationship with social media and digital platforms. Harry spent a significant portion of this conversation explaining why social media is dangerous, exploitative, and harmful. He talked about how these platforms are designed to addict users, how they destroy mental health, how they manipulate children, and how tech companies prioritize profit over safety. He called them out for creating systems with no accountability, for fostering environments where kids literally die, and for refusing to implement basic safety measures. All valid criticisms, all important points, all delivered on a podcast that exists because of, is distributed through, and relies entirely on those exact same platforms for reach and impact. Let's break down this contradiction step by step, because it's truly spectacular in its audacity. Hasan Minhaj's podcast, where this interview took place, has over 2 million YouTube subscribers. Harry mentioned that number himself, jokingly asking for a knighthood based on that metric. 2 million subscribers on YouTube, which is owned by Google, one of the largest tech companies in the world. The same tech companies Harry criticizes for exploiting users and prioritizing engagement over safety. But it doesn't stop at YouTube. This podcast is distributed across multiple platforms: Spotify, Apple Podcasts, various social media channels where clips are shared, Instagram, Twitter, or X, or whatever we're calling it now, Facebook, TikTok, all the platforms Harry warns parents about. All the systems he says are designed to exploit and manipulate are the exact channels carrying his message about how dangerous they are. The irony is so thick you could cut it with a knife.
I think that social media, the way that it is now, is hampering a lot of the progress that we've made and taking a lot of young men and young boys into very dark places, which should concern all of us.
He's absolutely right. Social media does take people into dark places. The algorithms do promote harmful content. The engagement-driven model does prioritize controversy and emotional manipulation over truth and safety. Harry articulates these problems clearly and with obvious conviction, but he's articulating them through the very machine he's criticizing. He's using the algorithm to spread his anti-algorithm message. He's leveraging engagement metrics to warn about engagement-driven exploitation. He's relying on the reach of these platforms to tell people the platforms are dangerous. You might argue that this is necessary, that you have to meet people where they are, that using these platforms to critique them is the only way to reach a large enough audience to make a difference. That's a fair point, and there's certainly logic to it. Activists and advocates often have to work within imperfect systems to create change. But here's where that justification falls apart for Harry specifically. He's not just using these platforms as a necessary evil to spread an important message. He's built his entire post-royal career on them. His public presence, his advocacy work, his ability to maintain relevance and influence all depend on the very systems he's condemning. Think about it. Since leaving royal duties, how has Harry communicated with the public? Through carefully managed media appearances, podcast interviews, his memoir, which was promoted heavily across social media, the Netflix documentary series about him and Meghan, speeches and events that are filmed and shared online, Every single touchpoint between Harry and his audience flows through digital platforms and social media distribution. He's not avoiding these systems, he's embracing them. He's just trying to have it both ways by simultaneously benefiting from them and criticizing them. The Parents Network that Harry promotes in this interview, it has social media accounts. It uses these platforms to spread awareness, share resources, and connect with families. The Arktowell Foundation, same thing. Instagram presence, Twitter updates, Facebook posts, all leveraging the exact algorithms and engagement tactics that Harry claims are destroying children's lives.
And the incentives are all wrong. The incentives are all to keep kids online for as long as possible, to farm and process your thinking, your thoughts, and just keep you there for as long as possible so they can make as much money as possible.
Yeah. Again, he's correct. The incentives are wrong. The business model of social media does depend on keeping users engaged as long as possible, harvesting their data and monetizing their attention. This is not controversial. It's how these companies make money. But Harry is participating in that same system. When he does an interview like this, the goal is engagement. The goal is views, shares, comments, discussion. The goal is to keep people watching, to create clips that go viral, to generate buzz that keeps his message and his profile circulating through the digital ecosystem. That's not criticism. That's just fact. That's how modern advocacy and public relations work. The contradiction becomes even more apparent when you consider what Harry says about accountability and regulation. He argues passionately that tech companies need to be held accountable, that there need to be legal protections, that the current lawlessness in the industry is unacceptable. Fair enough. But he's making these arguments while actively benefiting from that lawlessness. The lack of regulation that allows harmful content to flourish is the same lack of regulation that allows him to build his platform, control his narrative, and reach millions of people without traditional media gatekeepers. He's enjoying the benefits of the system while demanding it be changed, but only in ways that address the harms he's identified, not in ways that might limit his own access and influence. This is where the selective outrage becomes obvious. Harry isn't against social media and tech platforms broadly. He's against specific aspects of them that he's decided are harmful. He's fine with using them for his own purposes, for spreading his message, for maintaining his public profile. He's just not fine with how other people and companies use them. That's not principled opposition to a harmful system, that's wanting to control how the system operates while still benefiting from it. Let's talk about something else Harry mentions in this interview, something that really exposes the calculated nature of his platform strategy. When discussing why he and Meghan chose to focus on tech and social media issues, Harry reveals something fascinating. He admits that it wasn't very sexy as a cause, that they had to figure out how do you tell this story, and that social media just wasn't something you were clocking at the time.
Social media, the tech industry was not one of those things.
It just wasn't something you were clocking at the time.
No, but what we agreed and what we were in search of was what is the root cause of so much suffering and pain around the world.
Read between the lines here. Harry and Meghan looked for a cause that would position them as addressing root problems. They wanted something big, something important, something that would give them credibility and platform. They landed on tech and social media, not because of personal passion or experience, but because they identified it as a strategic opportunity. There's nothing wrong with choosing an advocacy focus strategically. Most foundations and public figures do exactly that. But it does undermine the narrative that Harry is some kind of authentic crusader against these platforms, speaking from deep personal conviction and experience. He literally admitted that this wasn't on his radar until he and Meghan decided it would be a good area to focus on for their post-royal brand. And make no mistake, that's what we're talking about here. A brand, a public image, a platform that allows Harry and Meghan to remain relevant, influential, and yes, profitable in a post-royal context. The advocacy is real, the issues are real, but the approach is calculated and strategic, built on leveraging the very systems they critique. This becomes even clearer when you look at how Harry discusses his own relationship with social media. He mentions that he and Meghan have had their fair share of beatings on social media. He acknowledges that they've been targeted, criticized, and attacked online. His frustration with that experience is palpable and understandable. But here's the thing. Having a negative personal experience with social media doesn't give you moral authority to use those same platforms however you want while telling everyone else they're dangerous. If anything, it reveals that Harry's issue isn't with social media itself, it's with social media when it doesn't serve his interests. When social media allows him to promote his work, share his message, and control his narrative, it's a tool he'll use extensively. When social media becomes a venue for criticism of him and Meghan, suddenly it's a dangerous force that needs to be regulated and controlled. The platform hasn't changed. His relationship to what's being said on it has. This is the fundamental problem with Harry's position. He's not advocating for dismantling these systems or getting rid of them. He's not even arguing for such strict regulation that they couldn't function as business models. He's arguing for a version of these platforms that serves his purposes, protects people he cares about, but still allows him the access and reach he needs to maintain his public presence. That's not fighting the system. That's trying to tilt the system in your favor while pretending to oppose it. And the fact that he either doesn't see this contradiction or doesn't care about it reveals everything about his approach to privacy, publicity, and platform. Harry wants to be seen as someone who's above it all, someone who's opted out of the toxic cycle of social media and celebrity culture, but he hasn't opted out. He's just trying to participate on his own terms, using these platforms when they benefit him, criticizing them when they don't, and positioning himself as a voice of moral authority while doing exactly what he's warning others against. The platform problem isn't that Harry uses social media, it's that he uses it while pretending he's somehow different from everyone else who uses it. He's not. He's just another person leveraging these tools for his own purposes, except he's wrapped that behavior in the language of advocacy and child safety to make it seem noble rather than self-serving. And nowhere is this contradiction more apparent than in his fundamental misunderstanding of what privacy actually means in the context he's created for himself. Here's what Harry fundamentally doesn't understand, or refuses to acknowledge. Privacy isn't something you can claim while simultaneously courting publicity. It's not a shield you get to raise and lower based on what's convenient in the moment. It's not a buzzword you throw around to justify your choices while ignoring how those choices contradict the very concept you're claiming to protect. Real privacy means stepping back from public life. It means not doing interviews. It means not writing memoirs. It means not sitting down for podcast conversations that will be viewed by millions. It means accepting that if you want to be left alone, you actually have to remove yourself from the public conversation, not try to control it from within. Harry hasn't done any of that. Instead, he's created this bizarre middle ground where he demands privacy while actively maintaining a public profile. He wants the world to stop talking about him and his family, but he won't stop talking about himself and his family. He wants media outlets to leave him alone, but he'll gladly sit for interviews when he controls the narrative and the platform. This isn't privacy, this is selective publicity, and the fact that he's labeled it as a privacy campaign is perhaps the most successful rebranding exercise of the past decade. Let's look at what Harry has done since claiming he wanted privacy and leaving royal duties. He's written a best-selling memoir called Spare that detailed incredibly personal aspects of his life, his family relationships, his struggles, and his grievances. The book was a massive commercial success, promoted extensively across media platforms, turned into headlines for weeks, and shared intimate details that actual privacy-seeking individuals would never dream of making public. He and Meghan did a multi-part Netflix documentary series about their relationship, their struggles with the royal family, and their decision to leave Britain. The series was watched by millions, dissected by media outlets worldwide, and designed specifically to tell their side of the story to the largest possible audience. That's the opposite of seeking privacy. That's seeking controlled publicity. They've done multiple high-profile interviews, Oprah, various podcast appearances, including this one with Hassan Minhaj, speeches at major events, public appearances that are carefully photographed and shared. Every single one of these is a choice to be in the public eye, to share their perspective, to maintain relevance and influence. And somehow, throughout all of this, Harry maintains that he's fighting for privacy. He frames every interview as necessary advocacy. Every public appearance is serving a greater good. Every revelation is justified by the importance of the message. The mental gymnastics required to hold these contradictory positions simultaneously is truly Olympic level. During this interview, Harry makes a comment that perfectly encapsulates his confused understanding of privacy. When discussing whether parents should post photos of their children online, he says parents can do whatever they want, but then immediately pivots to warning them about the dangers. He acknowledges it's really sad that parents have to worry about sharing photos with distant relatives, as if he's sympathetic to the difficulty of maintaining family connections in a digital age. But here's the thing, Harry has the resources, the platform, and the influence to actually live a private life if he wanted one. He could share photos with his family through private, secured channels. He could maintain relationships without social media. He could raise his children completely out of the public eye if that's what he truly valued above all else. Instead, he's doing interviews about his children. He's discussing his parenting philosophy on public platforms. He's sharing anecdotes about his daughter's behavior. He's mentioning his kids' ages and his family's plans, all while warning other parents about doing similar things. The cognitive dissonance is staggering. Harry seems to genuinely believe that because he's not posting photos on Instagram himself, he's protecting his children's privacy. He doesn't see that discussing them in interviews, mentioning them in public appearances, and including details about them in his advocacy work is still putting information about them into the public domain. It's still creating a digital footprint. It's still contributing to the exact problem he claims to be fighting against. This reveals something crucial about Harry's worldview. He believes he can curate what privacy means for himself and his family. He gets to decide which details are acceptable to share and which aren't. He gets to control the narrative by choosing when to speak and when to stay silent. In his mind, this is protecting privacy because he's the one making the decisions about what gets shared. But that's not how privacy works in reality. Once information is public, it's public. It doesn't matter if Harry shared it willingly in an interview he chose to do, or if a tabloid published it without permission. The information is out there either way. The digital footprint exists either way. The public knows those details either way. The only difference is that when Harry shares information voluntarily, he gets to feel like he's in control. He gets to believe he's protecting his family because he's choosing what to reveal. But he's not protecting anything. He's just deciding how to expose them, which is fundamentally different from actual protection. Throughout this interview, Harry talks about the importance of children having the right to grow up without their lives being documented and shared online. He discusses how damaging it is for kids to have their images and information circulating in ways they can't control. He emphasizes that children should get to decide their own relationship with technology and public life when they're old enough to make informed decisions. All of this is reasonable and important. Children should have agency over their digital presence. They should get to decide what's shared about them once they're mature enough to understand the implications. Parents should be thoughtful about what they post and how it might affect their children's future privacy and autonomy. But Harry is making these decisions for his children right now, in real time, on public platforms with millions of viewers. He's deciding that mentioning their ages is fine, that sharing anecdotes about their behavior is acceptable, that discussing his parenting conversations with Meghan is worth it for the sake of his advocacy message. His children aren't making these choices. He is. And once those details are out there, they can't be taken back. Archie and Lilibet will grow up knowing that their father discussed them in interviews, shared details about their childhood, and used their existence as part of his public platform, all while claiming he was protecting their privacy. The contradiction will be impossible to miss, and they'll have to reconcile the fact that the man who sued newspapers for invasion of privacy was simultaneously invading theirs, just in a different, more controlled way. This is the privacy delusion at its core. Harry has convinced himself that because he's choosing what to share, he's maintaining privacy. Because he's doing interviews for good causes, the exposure is justified. Because he's not posting on social media directly, he's somehow different from parents who do. None of these things are true, but Harry seems to genuinely believe them, which makes the contradiction even more profound. The reality is that Harry wants privacy from criticism and unwanted attention, but he also wants publicity for his advocacy work and his carefully crafted public image. He wants to be left alone when it's inconvenient to be in the spotlight, but he wants access to that spotlight when he has something to say. He wants his children protected from paparazzi and tabloids, but he's fine mentioning them when it serves his narrative. This pick-and-choose approach to privacy might make sense from Harry's perspective, but it's not actual privacy. It's public relations masquerading as privacy advocacy, it's control disguised as protection, and it's a fundamental misunderstanding of what privacy means in the context he's created for himself. You cannot be a public figure fighting for privacy. The two things are inherently contradictory. You can be a public figure advocating for privacy rights for others. You can use your platform to raise awareness about privacy issues, but you cannot claim to value privacy for yourself while actively maintaining a public presence and sharing personal details in interviews. Harry wants the best of both worlds, and he's constructed an elaborate justification for why he deserves both. But the justification doesn't hold up under scrutiny, and this interview proves it beyond any doubt. Let's address the elephant that's been lurking in the background of this entire conversation. Harry positioned himself as someone who had no choice but to leave Britain, who was forced out by impossible circumstances, who fled to America to escape relentless media intrusion and protect his family from the same fate that befell his mother. That narrative has been the foundation of everything Harry and Meghan have done since stepping back from royal duties. They were victims. They were driven out. They had no other option. The media was too invasive, the pressure too intense, the racism too pervasive. They had to escape for their own safety and sanity. And you know what? Some of that might be true. The British tabloid media can be brutal. The scrutiny on royal family members is intense. The racist undertones in some of the coverage of Meghan were undeniable and disgusting. No one should have to endure that level of harassment and hatred. But here's what undermines that entire victim narrative. Everything Harry has done since leaving has been voluntary. Every interview, every public appearance, every podcast conversation, every documentary, every memoir, all of it was a choice. Nobody forced him to write Spare. Nobody mandated that he do a Netflix series. Nobody required him to sit down with Oprah or Hassan Minhaj or any other interviewer. These were active decisions to re-engage with the very publicity machine he claimed was destroying his life. And that's where the victim narrative falls apart completely.
I guess when we moved to the US, one of the things that we both agreed on was, yes, we could focus on the things that really, that are very clearly, obviously aligned to our passions and causes.
Listen to that phrasing carefully. They moved to the US and decided they could focus on their passions and causes. Not that they wanted to disappear from public life. Not that they planned to live quietly and privately. They wanted to focus on specific things, on their terms, using their platform in ways they controlled. This wasn't an escape from publicity. This was a rebranding, a relocation of where and how they engage with media and public attention. They didn't leave the spotlight, they just moved to a different stage with different lighting and a script they wrote themselves. Throughout this interview, Harry talks about the challenges of being in the public eye, the difficulty of navigating media attention, the harm that intrusive coverage can cause, but he never acknowledges that he's choosing to be in that position. He never admits that every interview he does is a voluntary act that invites more attention, more coverage, more public discussion of his life and choices. Instead, he frames it all as necessary advocacy. He's not doing interviews because he wants attention. He's doing them because the cause is too important not to speak out. He's not maintaining a public profile for his own benefit. He's using his platform to make a difference. It's always justified by the greater good, never acknowledged as the voluntary publicity seeking that it actually is. The problem with this framing is that it allows Harry to maintain his victim status while actively courting the very thing he claims victimized him. He gets to be the person who was driven away by invasive media while simultaneously engaging with media on his own terms. He gets to complain about unwanted attention while creating situations that generate exactly that attention. This interview is a perfect example. Harry chose to do this podcast. He knew it had over 2 million subscribers. He understood it would be clipped, shared, discussed, and turned into headlines. He was aware that every word he said would become public content, analyzed and commented on by media outlets and social media users alike. And he did it anyway, not because he had to, not because someone forced him, but because he wanted to promote the Parents Network, raise awareness about his cause, and maintain his public presence as an advocate and thought leader on these issues. All legitimate reasons, but all voluntary choices that contradict his claim that he just wants to be left alone. What makes this even more frustrating is that Harry could actually have privacy if he truly wanted it. He has the resources to live a completely private life. He could raise his children away from cameras, avoid all interviews, decline all public appearances, and simply exist as a wealthy private citizen in California. Plenty of people do exactly that. Plenty of celebrities have stepped away from the spotlight and lived quiet lives, but Harry doesn't want that. What he wants is selective privacy. He wants to be able to speak out when he has something to say, then retreat into privacy when he doesn't want to be bothered. He wants to control the conversation, curate his image, and manage his narrative, all while claiming he's being victimized by the very system he's voluntarily participating in. The most revealing moment in this interview comes when Harry discusses why he and Meghan chose to focus on tech and social media issues. He admits it wasn't originally on their radar. It wasn't a passion that drove them from day one. They looked for the root cause of suffering and identified this as a strategic area where they could make an impact.
We were in search of was what is the root cause of so much suffering and pain around the world. If we can identify that, how can we shine a light on that?
This is calculated positioning. This is brand development. This is two people who left one institution and needed to build a new platform, a new identity, a new reason for the public to pay attention to them. There's nothing inherently wrong with that, but it completely contradicts the narrative that they just wanted privacy and to be left alone. They wanted relevance. They wanted influence. They wanted a platform. They just wanted it on their terms, in a context they controlled, supporting causes they chose. That's not escaping the system. That's trying to rebuild the system around themselves. Throughout this conversation, Harry positions himself as someone who understands the pain of media intrusion and public scrutiny better than most people. And he probably does. Growing up in the royal family, losing his mother to circumstances involving paparazzi, living his entire life under intense public observation, these are real experiences that undoubtedly shaped his perspective. But instead of using those experiences to genuinely step away and advocate from a position of having chosen privacy, he's using them as credentials to maintain a public platform while claiming victimhood. His past trauma becomes justification for his current choices, even when those choices actively contradict his stated values. This is particularly evident when Harry discusses social media and its impact on his family. He mentions that he and Meghan have taken beatings on social media, that they've faced their share of online harassment and criticism. The implication is that this validates their advocacy work, that their personal experience with online toxicity makes them uniquely qualified to speak on these issues.
We've had our fair share of beatings on social media, and I guess when we moved to the US, one of the things that we both agreed on was, yes, we could focus on the things that really, that are very clearly, obviously aligned to our passions and causes.
This is calculated positioning. This is brand development. This is two people who left one institution and needed to build a new platform, a new identity, a new reason for the public to pay attention to them. There's nothing inherently wrong with that, but it completely contradicts the narrative that they just wanted privacy and to be left alone. They wanted relevance, they wanted influence, they wanted a platform, they just wanted it on their terms, in a context they controlled, supporting causes they chose. That's not escaping the system, that's trying to rebuild the system around themselves. Throughout this conversation, Harry positions himself as someone who understands the pain of media intrusion and public scrutiny better than most people. And he probably does. Growing up in the royal family, losing his mother to circumstances involving paparazzi, living his entire life under intense public observation, these are real experiences that undoubtedly shaped his perspective. But instead of using those experiences to genuinely step away and advocate from a position of having chosen privacy, he's using them as credentials to maintain a public platform while claiming victimhood. His past trauma becomes justification for his current choices, even when those choices actively contradict his stated values. This is particularly evident when Harry discusses social media and its impact on his family. He mentions that he and Meghan have taken beatings on social media, that they've faced their share of online harassment and criticism. The implication is that this validates their advocacy work, that their personal experience with online toxicity makes them uniquely qualified to speak on these issues. But here's what that admission actually reveals. Harry and Meghan are on social media, or at least aware of and affected by what's said about them there. They're not actually disconnected from these platforms. They're engaged enough to know what's being said, to feel the impact of criticism, to consider it beatings that they've had to endure. So when Harry warns about the dangers of social media, when he talks about how harmful these platforms can be, he's speaking from personal experience. But that personal experience isn't driving him to disconnect completely. It's driving him to try to change the conversation, control the narrative, and position himself as the victim of systems he's still actively participating in. This is the core problem with the voluntary victim position. You cannot claim to be escaping something while running directly toward it. You cannot position yourself as having fled publicity while actively seeking it on your own terms. You cannot complain about media intrusion while voluntarily sitting for interviews that invite more media attention. Harry has every right to use his platform however he wants. He has every right to advocate for causes he believes in. He has every right to do interviews, write books, and maintain a public presence. But he doesn't have the right to do all of those things while simultaneously claiming he's a victim of the very system he's voluntarily engaging with. The victimhood narrative might have been valid when he was in Britain, subject to a media environment he couldn't control. But the moment he left, chose his own path, and started making voluntary decisions to engage with publicity on his own terms, that narrative expired. What he's doing now is not victimhood. It's strategic public relations dressed up as advocacy and protection. And the fact that he either can't see that distinction or chooses to ignore it reveals everything about what this is really all about. So what is this really about? Strip away the advocacy language, the child safety concerns, the warnings about social media dangers, and the privacy rhetoric. What's actually happening here? This interview, like everything Harry and Meghan have done since leaving royal life, is about control. It's about controlling their narrative, controlling their image, controlling how the public perceives them, and controlling the terms of their engagement with media and publicity. The privacy campaign, the child safety advocacy, the tech criticism, all of it serves this central goal of maintaining control while staying relevant. Think about what Harry has actually built since leaving Britain. He's created a structure where he gets to be a public figure on his own terms. He does interviews, but only with friendly hosts in sympathetic environments. He shares his story, but only the parts he wants to share, framed the way he wants them framed. He discusses important issues, but always in ways that position him as the expert, the victim, or the hero. This isn't privacy, this is curated publicity. And the genius of it, the truly brilliant part, is that he's managed to frame this curated publicity as privacy advocacy. He's convinced a significant portion of the public that by controlling his own narrative, he's somehow protecting his privacy and fighting against invasive media practices. But look at what he's actually doing in this interview. He's promoting the Parents Network, which is an Archewell Foundation initiative. Archewell is Harry and Meghan's organization, their brand, their vehicle for maintaining relevance and influence. Every interview Harry does, every cause he champions, every public appearance he makes, it all flows back to building and sustaining this brand. The advocacy work is real, the issues are real. The Parents Network probably does help families dealing with social media harm, but it's also a vehicle for keeping Harry and Meghan in the public conversation, maintaining their platform, and justifying their continued media presence. It gives them a reason to do interviews like this one, which in turn keeps them relevant, which enables more opportunities, which sustains their public profile. This is exactly what Harry criticized about social media and tech companies earlier in this interview. He talked about how these companies create systems that keep users engaged for as long as possible, farming their attention and monetizing their presence. He called it exploitative and harmful. But what he's built is essentially the same model, just applied to his own celebrity and public image. He's created a system that keeps the public engaged with his story, that farms attention and sympathy, that monetizes his royal background and personal struggles. The mechanics are different, but the underlying strategy is remarkably similar to what he's criticizing. When Harry talks about tech companies lacking accountability, what he really means is that they won't be accountable to him and people like him. When he discusses the need for regulation, what he's advocating for is a system where he and other public figures have more control over what's said about them online. When he warns about exploitation, he's not worried about the model itself. He's worried about being on the receiving end of it. This becomes crystal clear when you look at his own behavior. He's fine with using these platforms when they serve his interests. He's comfortable doing interviews that will be clipped and shared across social media to promote his causes. He has no problem with the attention economy when he's the one generating and benefiting from that attention. The issue only arises when the attention turns critical, or when he's not the one controlling it. Throughout this interview, Harry positions himself as someone uniquely qualified to speak on these issues because of his experiences. He's lived under intense media scrutiny. He's lost family members to circumstances involving media intrusion. He's raised children in an environment where privacy is challenging. All of this is true, and all of it does give him a certain perspective. But that perspective hasn't led him to reject the system. It's led him to try to reshape it to better serve his needs. He doesn't want less attention, he wants better attention. He doesn't want privacy, he wants control. He doesn't want to escape publicity. He wants to manage it more effectively. The real agenda here isn't protecting children from social media harm, though that may be a sincere secondary concern. The real agenda is building and maintaining a public platform that allows Harry and Meghan to stay relevant, influential, and in control of their narrative, while claiming they're doing it all reluctantly, only because the causes are too important not to speak out. This is why the contradictions don't bother Harry. This is why he can discuss his children while warning others not to. This is why he can use social media platforms while criticizing them. This is why he can do voluntary interviews while claiming he wants privacy. Because none of this is actually about privacy or protection or even advocacy. Fundamentally, it's about building a new model of celebrity that gives him the benefits of fame without the accountability that traditionally comes with it. Harry wants to be able to share his perspective, promote his causes, maintain his public profile, and generate income from his royal status and personal story, all while being shielded from criticism, protected from accountability, and treated as a victim when anyone questions his choices or contradictions. That's the real goal here, and the privacy advocacy is the vehicle for achieving it. Look at how he discusses the Parents Network in this interview. He talks about giving families a space to heal, to share their stories, to realize they're not alone, all noble and important. But notice what else it does. It positions Harry as a leader, a convener, someone who's using his platform and resources to make a difference. It generates positive press. It creates content for interviews like this one. It justifies his continued public presence. The work might genuinely help people, but it also conveniently serves Harry's need to maintain relevance and control his narrative. That's not a coincidence. That's strategy. That's building a model where doing good works and maintaining celebrity status are inextricably linked, where one justifies and enables the other. When Harry admits that social media and tech weren't originally on his and Meghan's radar, that they looked for root causes of suffering and identified this as their focus, what he's really admitting is that this was a calculated choice. They needed a cause. They needed something that would give them credibility, generate attention, and allow them to build a platform separate from their royal identity. Tech and social media harm fit that need perfectly. It's a legitimately important issue that affects millions of people. It's something where Harry's personal experiences with media intrusion give him credibility. It's topical and relevant. It's an area where wealthy celebrities can fund initiatives and organizations. And crucially, it's a cause that allows them to do exactly what they're doing right now, sitting for interviews and maintaining public visibility, while claiming it's all in service of the greater good. This isn't criticism of the cause itself. Child safety online matters. Social media regulation matters. These are real issues that deserve attention and action. But Harry and Meghan's approach to these issues reveals that the work is as much about building their brand and maintaining their platform as it is about actually solving problems. The real agenda is staying in the game while changing the rules to benefit themselves. It's maintaining celebrity status while being protected from the normal consequences of that status. It's having a public platform while being shielded from accountability. It's enjoying the benefits of fame while claiming to be victims of the system that creates fame. And the truly masterful part is that Harry has managed to convince himself and many others that this is all about privacy and protection and advocacy. He genuinely seems to believe his own narrative. He appears to think that by controlling how he engages with publicity, he's somehow different from every other celebrity who carefully manages their public image. But he's not different. He's just wrapped traditional celebrity public relations in the language of trauma, privacy rights and child safety advocacy. He's rebranded image management as a noble crusade. He's turned controlling his narrative into a moral imperative rather than the standard celebrity practice it's always been. This interview exposes all of that. Not because Harry said anything particularly shocking or revealing, but because the contradictions are impossible to ignore when you strip away the justifications and look at what he's actually doing versus what he claims to value. He values privacy but does interviews. He warns about social media but uses those platforms. He wants to protect his children but discusses them publicly. He positions himself as a victim but makes voluntary choices that generate more attention. He criticizes tech companies for exploitation while exploiting his own story and status. He advocates for accountability while avoiding it himself. None of this is about what Harry says it's about. It's about building a sustainable model of celebrity that gives him maximum benefit with minimum accountability. And he's using privacy advocacy as the shield that makes it all seem noble, rather than the calculated brand management it actually is. That's the real story here. That's what this interview accidentally reveals when you examine it closely. And that's why the contradictions matter, because they expose the gap between Harry's stated values and his actual agenda. So here we are at the end of an hour-plus interview that was supposed to be about protecting children from social media harm. And what did we actually get? A masterclass in contradiction. A revealing look at how someone can preach one thing while practicing the complete opposite. A window into the carefully constructed world where Harry and Meghan have convinced themselves that what they're doing is fundamentally different from what everyone else does, even when the evidence says otherwise. Let's recap what we've uncovered here, because the pattern is unmistakable. Harry sat down to discuss privacy and child safety, then proceeded to share specific details about his own children's ages, behaviors, and daily life. He warned parents about posting their kids online while voluntarily discussing his kids in an interview that would reach millions. He positioned himself as a protective father while putting information about his children into the public domain for strategic purposes. He spent significant time criticizing social media platforms and tech companies for their exploitation and harm, all while using those exact platforms to distribute his message and maintain his public presence. He called out the engagement-driven business model while participating in that same model to promote his causes and sustain his relevance. He demanded accountability from tech companies while avoiding accountability for his own contradictions. He claimed to want privacy while doing voluntary interviews, writing memoirs, producing documentary series, and maintaining an active public profile. He positioned himself as a victim of media intrusion while actively courting media attention on his own terms. He fled Britain claiming he needed to escape the spotlight, then immediately stepped back into a different spotlight that he controls. And perhaps most revealingly, he admitted that his focus on tech and social media issues wasn't born from deep personal passion, but from a strategic decision to identify root causes of suffering where he could make an impact. He and Meghan chose this cause because it fit their needs for building a post-royal platform, not because it was something they were already fighting for. Every single one of these contradictions points to the same conclusion. This isn't about privacy. This isn't really about child safety, at least not primarily. This is about control. Control of narrative, control of image, control of how Harry and Meghan engage with the public, and control of the terms under which they maintain celebrity status. The privacy campaign is a vehicle for that control. The child safety advocacy gives them a reason to stay in the public eye while claiming they'd rather not be there. The criticism of tech companies allows them to position themselves as fighting against the system while actively using that system for their own benefit. It's all carefully constructed to give them the benefits of fame without the normal accountability that comes with it. And you know what? It's working. Harry has managed to build a public platform where he can do interviews, promote causes, maintain relevance, and generate income from his royal background and personal story, all while a significant portion of the public believes he's doing it reluctantly, only because the issues are too important. He's created a model where pursuing celebrity is reframed as advocacy, where managing his image becomes protecting his privacy, where voluntary publicity is presented as necessary sacrifice. The contradictions we've examined in this interview aren't bugs in Harry's approach, they're features. They're the inevitable result of trying to have it both ways, trying to be both private and public, both victim and advocate, both reluctant celebrity and active platform builder. You can't sustain those contradictory positions without revealing the gaps between what you say and what you do. This interview revealed all of those gaps in spectacular fashion. Harry's own words exposed the disconnect between his stated values and his actual behavior. His voluntary sharing of information about his children undermined his privacy advocacy. His use of social media platforms contradicted his criticism of them. His admission about strategically choosing this cause exposed the calculated nature of his entire post-royal brand. What makes this particularly significant is that Harry seems genuinely unaware of these contradictions, or at least genuinely convinced that his justifications make them acceptable. He appears to believe that because he's doing interviews for good causes, the exposure is justified. Because he's choosing what to share, he's maintaining privacy. Because he's criticizing the system while using it, he's somehow different from everyone else who does the same thing. But he's not different. He's just better at branding. He's wrapped standard celebrity behavior in the language of trauma, advocacy, and protection, making it seem noble rather than self-serving. He's convinced himself and many others that what he's doing is fundamentally different from what every other public figure does to manage their image and maintain their platform. The reality is that Harry wants to stay relevant and influential. He wants to maintain a public platform and continue benefiting from his royal status and personal story. He wants to do interviews and write books and produce content. There's nothing inherently wrong with any of that. Many people do it successfully without the contradictions. But Harry also wants to be seen as someone who's above all that. Someone who's reluctantly engaging with publicity only because the causes demand it. Someone who values privacy even while voluntarily sharing personal information. And that's where the whole construction falls apart. You can't do both. You have to choose. Either you value privacy and actually live privately, stepping away from interviews and public platforms, or you maintain a public presence and own the fact that you're choosing publicity over privacy. Either you oppose social media and disconnect from it, or you use those platforms and acknowledge that you're part of the system you're criticizing. Either you protect your children's information or you share it, but you can't do both simultaneously while claiming you're doing neither. Harry wants all of these contradictory things at once, and this interview proves he still hasn't figured out that you can't have it all. The privacy advocate who does podcast tours, the protective father who discusses his kids publicly, the tech critic who relies on those platforms, the victim of publicity who voluntarily seeks it. None of these positions are sustainable when examined closely. And that's exactly what we've done here. We've examined them closely. We've looked at Harry's actual words and behavior, not his carefully constructed narrative about what he's doing and why. And what we've found is a pattern of contradictions that exposes the real agenda behind the privacy campaign. This isn't the crusade Harry presents it as. It's brand management disguised as advocacy. It's image control wrapped in the language of protection and privacy. It's a calculated effort to build a sustainable model of celebrity that gives Harry everything he wants: relevance, influence, income, and platform, while shielding him from the normal consequences and criticisms that come with those benefits. The interview with Hassan Minhaj was supposed to raise awareness about child safety and social media harm, and maybe it did accomplish that for some viewers. But what it really accomplished was exposing the massive gap between what Harry says he values and what his actions reveal about his actual priorities. Privacy isn't doing interviews about privacy. Protection isn't publicly discussing what you're protecting. Advocacy isn't using the very systems you claim are harmful. And victimhood isn't voluntarily putting yourself in positions that generate the exact attention you claim to want to avoid. Harry can keep telling himself and the world that he's fighting the good fight, protecting his family, and advocating for important causes. But until he's willing to actually practice what he preaches, to align his behavior with his stated values, to choose either privacy or publicity instead of trying to have both, the contradictions will keep piling up. This interview added another mountain of them to the pile, and every time Harry opens his mouth to warn about the dangers of sharing too much while sharing too much himself, that mountain grows higher. At some point, even the most sympathetic observers have to acknowledge what's happening here. The privacy paradox isn't a paradox at all, it's a strategy, and this interview exposed it completely.